All right, I know what you're thinking. Your boy Gonzo is a stud. And of course, at the time, I would totally agree with you.
Gonzo, the Coast Guard years. Boston, episode 5, The Shower and the Fan.
Yep, that's right. I got a phone number. That pretty much made me like a god, or at least a super cool guy for a few days. I did end up calling Kristen a few days later. That's the name of the girl that I met at the cat club, just in case you were wondering. I don't recall exactly when I called her back, but it wasn't too long after that night. We did agree to meet up pretty soon. And, you know, it actually might have been the next night, too. Honestly, I don't remember. What I do remember, though, was that after we had gone out the next time, I think we ended up in the village and back at the cat club where we first met. I know we had a fun night because she ended up back on Governor's Island with me and stayed in my room. All right. I know what you're thinking. Your boy Gonzo is a stud. And of course, at the time, I would totally agree with you. You see, we were a bit drunk, maybe a lot drunk, and I'm not even sure how I snuck her back into the barracks, but I did. And you know, again, girls were not supposed to be on that side of the barracks. It was dudes only. I'm pretty sure it had something to do with the fact that we had one big bathroom and it was basically all dudes. There wasn't like multiple bathrooms, and co-ed bathrooms were not a thing back in the late 80s, early 90s. So yeah, there was that. So anyway, back to the whole drunk thing. So, and you know, people who smoke, and yes, I smoked back then, when you drink, you smoke even more. And I smoking a lot that night. And of course, I smoked Camel Lights because I was cool like that. A public service announcement, smoking is not cool, but if there was a time when it was cool, which it probably wasn't, smoking Camel Lights was the cool way to go. Not to be confused with the cool cigarettes, but that's a whole different thing. Anyway, so when you're out all night and you're smoking like a fuck ton, the consequences of all that smoking, well, you smell like really like cigarette smoke. You smell like shit. So we needed to get cleaned up, and she wanted to get cleaned up before she left, and I couldn't let her use the bathroom that I was using because that would just be. There are way too many dudes hanging out, and although they would think I was a stud, if they saw her, it would be my luck that some fucknut would end up ratting me out and I'd get kicked out of radar school, and that would truly suck. But I did have a plan. I knew exactly where to take her. So I grabbed some stuff to help her get cleaned up. I peeked outside my room, ran down the hall to make sure the coast was clear. And when it was, I told her to run down the hall to meet up with me. And so we ended up going to the side of the barracks where I was when I was going to ET school. Now, on that side of the barracks, I knew there were only a few people over there. As a matter of fact, the people that were over there were the Earls. They were the only ones on that side of the barracks, which was really a bonus. So we snuck into the bathroom, and a bathroom that I had been a lot. So if you recall, previous episodes, I talked about this particular bathroom ad nauseum. So she went in there and she went to take a shower and get all cleaned up and stuff. And I stood guard outside the doors. And of course, it was just my luck that one of them decided that he needed to go to the bathroom. I see him coming out of his door, and I'm like, crap. So I walked up to him real quick. I said, dude, you got to hold on, man. You can't go in there because, I told him that the chick from the cat club was there and blah, blah, blah. You know the deal. So he just kind of looked at me and, kind of like tried to look past my shoulder, see if he could see anybody. Of course, couldn't because she was in the bathroom and he was outside the bathroom. But anyway, so he goes back to his room, and like a couple of seconds later, the other two Earls are peeking out their door to see if they can see anything. And of course, they couldn't, but I don't blame them. But they waited until she got dressed. And then I walked in there and we walked out and, they made eye contact with her as she was coming out of the bathroom. And so we snuck back to my room at that point. And I don't know what we did, but we went back to my room for a few minutes. I don't remember why. And then we snuck out of the building because, well, at least till we got outside. Yeah. We went to the Coast Guard ferry, went back across over to South Ferry. And I know we ended up going to breakfast or something like that. And wherever we showed up. So back then in the late 80s, you were still allowed to smoke in restaurants. And again, so this chick, she like smoked a lot. I mean, more than me. And I thought I smoked a lot. So anyway, we're getting breakfast and stuff. And of course, what happens? We're smoking and we smell like shit again. So I'm not even sure why we went through this whole thing about. Anyway, we ended up going to the Port Authority where she was going to take a bus to get back home, which I thought was rather strange. And it was right about then that I found out that she was actually from New Jersey. And that's a whole different story, which reminds me, I need to write this down because it's actually funny as crap. So after that, I went back to Governor's Island and met up with Ron, and the Earls had already gone and told Ron what they had witnessed because, again, in their eyes, I didn't just get a phone number the other night. I had done what basically I wouldn't say it was unimaginable because we imagined stuff like this a lot, but it never happened. But it did. It actually happened to me. But anyway, I had gone, you know what? In their minds, I was super Gonzo. It was cool. Anyway, shit like that doesn't happen to me. So I guess I'm playing it up quite a bit because it was like a big deal back then. So anyway, for the next month or so, Ron and I were going to radar school. And we never really talked about the Cat Club girl, which is what they kept referring to her as. We would hang out a couple more times before I left New York, but it was all cool. I mean, it was kind of the same stuff. We'd go hang out somewhere and, smoke and drink a lot and go to the Cat Club a bunch. One of the things that I learned in radar school, I mean, besides radars, was there were places still in the barracks that I had not been before. One of them was this place that Ron had. Well, I don't know if he discovered it, but previously when Ron was at ET school, he and some of the other ET students had found a door, and this door led to a small, little, I don't know, alcove or whatever. And the alcove had these spiral stairs that went up, and they led to another small little room that had a trap door that you kind of pushed up, and it led to what? So they had it led to the roof, and the roof had these little, I don't know, you call them steeples or whatever, but they were these tiny little steeples, but they were dome shaped, and you can get up there and hang out. And that's what they did. They would go up there and just because and get drunk and said it was just another place to get drunk instead of your room, which we really weren't supposed to be doing that. So, but the other ATs would sneak up there and they would drink beer and just talk smack and do whatever. But one night, and I'm pretty sure it was 4th of July, Ron took me there and we grabbed a bunch of beer, Budweiser, I'm sure, and vodka. I think it was vodka. Because Ron liked to drink Boilermakers. So we had gone up to this thing, and Ron had a 35 millimeter camera, back when they actually had film and not digital. And you could see the fireworks, or most of the probably not even most, a good bit of the fireworks from the 4th of July celebration that was happening down by one of the piers. So Ron is sitting there trying to take photographs, and he had this whole thing he was doing, and I won't go into it. But he was taking photographs of the fireworks, which I thought was really cool. And it was one thing that clearly I now wanted to know how to do it. So I did spend some time afterward, years later, learning how to take photographs of fireworks. And yeah, it was pretty miserable. I sucked at it. But you know what? It was always worth a try. Anyway, radar school was over. I left, and the cat club girl, she and I had decided to stay in touch, which we did for a while. So a cab ride later back to LaGuardia Airport, fly back into Boston's Logan Airport. And then, by now I'm like airplane flying. Well, not that I was flying the airplane, but, I had flown a good number of times and taken a good number of taxis. So none of this was new to me. And I was feeling really confident. And clearly that was showing, because as I'm walking out of Logan Airport, there's like a line of taxis, and there was a young woman next to a cab putting her stuff in the trunk of the cab. She looked up at me and said, "Are you going to BU?" Which is Boston University for you uneducated cretins. Apparently I was dressed in a way that sort of gave off that BU vibe. And I think I was wearing like a pair of jeans, and I had a backpack on, and I was wearing a ball cap backwards, but I had like this purple ball cap, not like the thug or the trucker caps you see today. But anyway, it was more like a traditional baseball cap, closer to that vibe. But anyway, so she asked, was I going to BU? And, I said yes. And she said, "Do you want to share a cab?" And I'm like, okay, sure. So, okay, I know what you're thinking. Gonzo, you're an asshole. And you would be right. But if that was me today, but I would definitely not be doing that today. One, I clearly don't look like a BU student, and I'd more like a janitor at, Boston University or something. But anyway, I don't remember this person's name, vaguely remember the face and the hair. But anyway, we chatted a bit. I get in the car with her, the cab, and we headed off to Boston University. And so we were, talking and chatting and stuff like that. And she asked what I was doing at Boston University. And I told her I was, doing electronics, going to school for electronics and stuff. And because, at that point, I knew enough about electronics that I could just totally fake it. And I don't remember what she was doing, whatever. We got to her dorms on campus. She gave me her phone number. I guess they had a phone number in her room, or maybe it was a payphone or something. Yes, we had payphones back in the late 80s. So at this point, she gives me her phone number. Internally, I had gone from being Super Gonzo to Gonzo the Great. If the Earls could only see me now. So she had written her name and her phone number on a piece of paper that she had pulled out of her handbag or whatever. I shoved it into my pocket. And I remember it was like one of those weird, awkward hugs you do, like if you're in the backseat of a car. I know you're thinking about how that would look right now, but trust me, it was really awkward. So she gets out of the cab and, the pops the trunk, and she gets her luggage, and then she leaves. I take the back home. So before she leaves, I have like the cab door open. She walks back around and she gives me a quick kiss on the lips, and I'm like, ooh, I'm so excited. And then she leaves. But so as excited as I was that I had gotten a number, but then all of a sudden reality hit. She left me to pay the entire cab fare. And I had to go back to the Coast Guard base, which it wasn't too far away, counting the trip from the airport to Boston University. Then I had to go back to the Coast Guard base. So, this was going to cost me a whole, so far as I'm sort of a ton of money. And I didn't have a lot of money. And on top of that, how was I going to keep up this charade that I was a student at BU? Yeah, I had no idea. But I know. What the fuck was I thinking? I don't know. I wasn't thinking. And, well, clearly I was not thinking. I was thinking with the other head, not the one on my shoulders. We won't get into that because this is not that kind of podcast. So by the time I got back to the base, I had a ton of laundry to do. So I'm doing laundry and trying to figure out my next move with Miss Boston University, which the whole thing was actually a very short-lived situation. It kind of like sorted its way out without me having to do anything, really. As a matter of fact, this clearly was karma just poking me in the eye. Remember when I was doing laundry? When I just said I was doing laundry? So if you forgot already, you weren't paying attention. But I somehow, between getting back to the barracks and doing laundry, I lost a piece of paper from Miss Boston University. I was like, what the son of a... I'm an idiot. I don't know how I lost it, but I lost a piece of paper that had a thing on it. Although I guess the silver lining is I didn't have to figure out the whole thing of how to pretend I was going to Boston University. So that really wasn't a bad thing. Back in Boston, during my time when I was there, we had, and I previously mentioned before, we had a number of people, come in and out of Boston. And I think I mentioned too that I had eventually gotten a room right down the hall from Keith. Now, my roommate at the time was a guy named Brock. I think Brock was moving off base or he was getting out. And Brock was one of those guys that was in, he was either a storekeeper or a yeoman, so he was like more in support services from an administrative standpoint versus, technical. I clearly don't remember the timing of this. This is kind of like one of those, when they're filming movies, they tend to like film it like in out of order and then it gets edited together in the right order. But anyway, so one of the Mondays that I'd shown up back in Boston, this could have been like several months later after I'd gotten back from radar school, at EMD, there was a new dude who showed up and his name was Vanlin. Vanlin was from Michigan. I don't recall which part, but Michigan. And Vanlin was a really cool dude. He also had that stereotypical Coast Guard mustache that he actually looked like some kind of cartoon character. A little bit like Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, but he had like a blondish mustache. Anyway, but Vanlin was super cool. And as a matter of fact, Vanlin would end up coming with Keith and I to go to New Bedford quite a few times. Vanlin was always a little on the hyper side too. Like he would get excited about everything, and he was also sarcastic as shit. So when he was getting excited and he would say something sarcastic, it just made it that much funnier because he was a good guy to be around. And at some point, I guess I didn't overly offend him too much, but when Brock moved out, Vanlin asked if he could be my roommate, and I don't know if he asked me or not, but I think he requested to take that room, which was cool because we were both ETs and it made sense still. I don't remember if I had gone to Comdac school and had come back at some point. So Vanlin had, I don't know how this pertains to the story, but Vanlin, it will at some point later, like not this episode, but anyway, he had, brought his Chevy S10 pickup truck from back home. And he had a big old cab on the back, and I think it was in one of those extended cabs so you can fit, more people in, like 3 people extra in the back. I don't know. I'm getting old. They don't even make Chevy S10s anymore. So anyway, the reason I bring this up is because what's all to say is that Vanlin had a vehicle. That's why I'm talking about his truck. As I mentioned before, we were right down the hall from Keith and John, and our room had these big ass windows that went like nearly the entire length of the room, and it overlooked Commercial Street in the north end of Boston. So it was really cool, and these windows eventually would end up being like a bit of a lifesaver for us. Yes, because during the winter, our room, Vanlin and mine room, would get super fucking hot, like super hot. Not like Super Gonzo, but just super hot, like sweltering in there. Because the rooms, all the rooms, you didn't have like a temperature gauge or whatever, so you had no control over the room temperature. So you just got whatever the building was pumping out, and it would get so hot it was intolerable to sleep, at least for me. And okay, so for Vanlin too, because he complained and whined and bitched as bad as I did. But I think I was a little more low-key about it. But anyway, the reason our room was hotter than everybody else's, because it was, so that this building was super old and it still had boilers. And so basically it just moved hot water through the building. Our room, not all, but a bunch of the pipes that pushed the hot water through were on the walls on one side of our room. So it was constantly radiating heat from the walls into the room. And it was miserable, particularly because my bed was up against the wall where that was always radiating the heat. And so it really kind of sucked. So, we would open the window, but it just wasn't bringing enough air so here's what we thought. We're a bunch of ETs and we overanalyze and overthink everything. Our conclusion was that even though it was the dead of winter, that the amount of air pressure inside of our room was greater than the air pressure outside. So the hot air, although it was basically pushing out, and what we needed was the cold air to come in to displace the hot air. But that was never happening because the hot air was blowing out, but still wasn't enough to cool the room off. So we figured what we needed to do was figure out a way to increase the volume of cold air coming in. What we needed to find in the middle of a Boston winter was a fan. We had no idea where the hell we were going to find a fan in the middle of winter. However, Vanlin and I decided to go to the local Sears, and I think it was Sears, pretty sure it was Sears. And if you don't know what a Sears is, you are way younger than I am. I'll just leave it at that. But Sears, you got everything at Sears back in the day. Appliances, tools, everything you needed for your home, like furniture, everything you can get at Sears. It was kind of like a mashup of a Best Buy and like a Kohl's department store, but it was all under one roof. They used to have big, thick catalogs, a Sears catalog, and that was like a thing. People would wait for that thing to come in the mail. The thing was like 2 or 3 inches thick, and you could probably like heat your home for the whole year off of Sears catalog. Just use that to feed your fire. So Vanlin and I go to Sears, and we start walking around, and thankfully a sales associate comes up to us and asked to help us and what we were looking for, the kind of things you would expect from a sales associate. And we told the dude what we were looking for. And of course, he was a bit as shocked as we were that we were looking for a fan. So, but being super confident, the dude's like, okay, well, let's just go over to where, if we have fans, this is where they would be section. And so we go up to this particular area. It was empty. No fans were on the shelves for sale. Was, however, a floor model. One fan that had like it wasn't even in a box, had a little tag on it. And being a good sales guy, he's like, you can buy the floor model. Vanlin and I were super excited because we're like, hell yeah, we'll take it. So we head back to the barracks. So we open up the window in our room. We prop up the fan in the window. We like wedged it in there, and we had positioned the fan so that it would suck in the cold air from outside and push it into the room. And in no time at all, the room cooled down, and we were both pretty excited that the whole thing worked out. As a matter of fact, people who came by our room thought it was fairly clever, if not comical. We thought it was pretty comical too, but a massive stroke of dumb luck that we were able to buy a fan at all.
You've been listening to Gonzo the Coast Guard Years, written and produced by Tim Gonzalez, and I'm Nicholas Gonzalez, the voice guy. This episode was produced by Mislaid Productions.
Now, where did I put that thing?